Robin, you've made some big announcements on which seats are going to be available and how you're going to secure passengers on board. I guess the big question that everybody's asking themselves at the moment is it safe to fly?
Hi, Guy. Good to see you again. Thanks for having me on. When I think about the miracle of flight, right? I mean, no one gives a second thought on getting on an airplane, and millions of flights happen every year. And then 9/11 came, and we responded to the security challenges, and there were concerns back then about people saying, I'm not going to fly again. And I think what we're facing now is another real concern that people have with this COVID-19. And I think the industry is really stepping up to the plate and doing a lot of things to make flying safe so that people can feel confident about flying with us in the future.
So that's a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Clearly, kind of limiting the number of seats that you're going to have on board is going to have a meaningful impact in terms of load factor. So how does this affect the economics? If you take out one seat from every row, how does that change the economics of flying? What sort of load factors does that mean you're going to be operating with? What is an economic load factor to break even? And how does it compare with what you were looking at before?
Yeah, so for the industry, break-even load factor is normally between 75 and 80%. So the fact that we're capping flights and keeping middle seats free, keeping aisle seats free means obviously we're going to be limiting flights to below that break-even load factor. So it's not sustainable in the long term, but it's very important right now. And it's one of those things that we're doing to give people a little bit more confidence, a little bit more comfort about flying.
One of the other factors that obviously is going to be affecting the way that we all fly is that it's going to take longer to get on airplanes. It's going to take longer to get off airplanes. Cleaning is going to be something, obviously, that you're going to have to do a great deal more of. For a low-cost carrier, turnaround times are absolutely important. You want to have the aircraft in the air flying as much as possible. So how will turnaround times be affected, and what, again, does that do to the economics of any given route?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think out of any crisis, there's always good things that emerge, and I think one of the things that will change for good in our industry is the cleaning and sanitization of airplanes. I mean, it was good before, but I think it's we're all taking it to the next level, and that will pressure turn times. Again, it's not really an issue right now, Guy, because we're capping flights to under 60% load factor. We have extra airplanes we can bring in. We have a lot of airplanes like other airlines parked and sitting idle. We can bring in if the number of flights resume, and then over time, I think we will adjust. And I think longer term, you will see increased turn times as an industry trend. And we'll have to manage it as we've managed other things that have been thrown at us in the past.
Just in terms of kind of how you see demand developing from here, we have a sort of proprietary tracking system that looks at the seat availability that is out there at the moment, and what that is telling us is that you are starting as of June the 8th to put many more seats out there, roughly a kind of doubling of what you're offering now. Are you testing the water? Are you trying to figure out and understand what demand looks like, and what kind of information are you getting back?
Yeah, so I would describe since the beginning of April, we've been bumping along the bottom. We're now bumping off the bottom. One of the things I look at every morning is the TSA data that shows how many people flew through the checkpoints the day before. And as an industry now, we're seeing about 8 to 10% of what we would normally see. So we've definitely seen some small improvements. We think in June there's going to be more demand for flying from May. We're seeing that in some of our forward bookings. Again, we're very cautious, but we expect to fly our June schedule probably between 70 to 75% of what we normally fly, whereas in May we were flying 85 to 90% down on what we would normally fly.
And what kind of traffic is it? Like, is it the kind of visiting friends and relatives kind of traffic? Is it leisure traffic? Is there any business travel in there?
Yes, well, there's still a lot of essential workers flying around, medical personnel, people in the distribution business, definitely some visiting friends and family, people returning back to the Northeast who left the Northeast just before this pandemic broke. So it's a real mix. And we're also seeing into the summer some small interest in vacation travel as well. We're talking to a number of sort of our vacation markets, particularly in the Caribbean, to understand better their opening plans.
You don't see a lot of business traffic, and you've certainly been trying to change that over the last couple of years. Is business the last to come back? Do you see business coming back in anything like the same way that it did before?
Yeah, I think business will come back more slowly. I think that we're all sort of finding things like this are worth a lot better than we thought. We're about 80% leisure, 20% business. I feel good about where JetBlue is. I mean, we have a largely domestic network. The international flights that we do have tend to be close to home. I still think there's going to be a concern for a while, people traveling too far from home. I think we're going to see some different quarantine rules get put in place around the world that's going to confuse people. So I think business travel will come back a little bit more slowly. I think probably on business routes where we may fly 8 to 10 a day, we'd be flying maybe 3 or 4 for a while until demand comes back.
What about transatlantic? You continue to say that it's going to happen in 2021.
Yes.
Is it now late 2021?
It's later 2021. We are still committed to do it. I mean, we think that actually by late 2021, demand between Europe and the US should be largely back to where it was. And we're going to have the same old problems of legacy airlines gouging people with very high fares. So we still see a great opportunity for us to come in and make significant price reductions to make traveling across the Atlantic affordable.
Just when you look at what is happening with that transatlantic story, Gatwick, a number of airlines have withdrawn from Gatwick and are retrenching back to Heathrow. Certainly seeing that with the likes of Virgin. Virgin is under stress. Do you see the possibility of extra slots becoming available?
Yes, I mean, we've always said we see the path into more than one London airport, and I see an even wider and brighter path now than I did then.
And you mentioned what is happening with the legacy carriers. Michael O'Leary has been very kind of outspoken on his kind of perception of what is happening here. He doesn't see this as being a level playing field in terms of the aid that is being handed out to the likes of potentially Lufthansa and Air France KLM. What's your perspective on that?
Well, I think in the US, we've been very lucky. The US administration acted very quickly with Congress. They passed the CARES Act. And actually, we received payroll support assistance, as did other airlines. And that's allowed us to pay our people and keep our people on. JetBlue, like other airlines, hasn't furloughed anybody. We've got everyone on the payroll. That commitment lasts through to the end of September. And the reason for that is when the economy comes back here, the aviation industry is so important to help businesses and help people get going again. And if you furloughed everyone and there's no one around to fly the airplanes, it will just hinder the recovery. And so the industry in the US is very thankful for that. We're very thankful for that. And we're ready to serve when things get going again.
So what happens in Q4 if things don't get going again? Like, as you say, it kind of runs until the end of September. What then? If we haven't seen a pickup later this year, how do you react? How do you reposition the airline at that point?
So, I mean, we've always had a low-cost structure. We've always, I think, been very careful about how we plan for growth. We have a relatively simple fleet. As I said earlier, we have a network that is largely U.S. domestic, or the international we have tends to be Caribbean, Central, a little bit of Latin America. We don't have any wide-bodied airplanes. So we do believe that these are the businesses that will come back first. Having said that, I still think it's highly likely that when we get to October, we're going to be a smaller airline, a smaller industry, and we're going to attempt to do everything we can to manage that through voluntary means. JetBlue's never furloughed a crew member in our 20-year history. We're proud of that. We'd like to continue that. But we also recognize that we are going to be smaller. We've had great success already. About 14,000 of our 23,000 crew members have taken some form of voluntary time off. And that's really helped us get through this in a way that is sustainable.
If it came to it, though, do you think you could see yourself, for instance, withdrawing Mint? Is that a possibility? the front of the plane. Could you see yourself withdrawing from certain cities in terms of the network that you're operating at the moment? Is there a people effect? Is there a network effect as well, and an offering effect in terms of what the business could ultimately look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I do think Mint will bounce back strongly, so we certainly have no plans to withdraw from Mint. I think that I think what it's going to look like is, the leisure markets where we may fly once a day, we'll be flying maybe 3 to 5 times a week for a while until demand comes back. For business markets where we may be 6, 8, 10 flights a day, we'll be flying 3 or 4 flights a day. I don't see longer term any changes to the places that we fly. I feel pretty confident that everywhere we fly today will bounce back eventually, albeit we'll have less flights for a while.